Who?
Who? Who? Were you an owl?
I remember causing a little bit of a debate when I asked people what they thought of this Target exclusive McFarlane Toys Build-A-Figure that is not Batman, but kind of sort of, and the response was rather interesting. Here we have the crime syndicate Owlman. And I know you're probably wondering, why are you reviewing him if he's not technically Batman? That's because he kind of is and kind of isn't. He's kind of like this different other Earth variant that decided to take up the mantle of Owlman and not Batman. Though technically there is still a Wayne underneath that cowl, Thomas Wayne Jr. to be specific. And like I said, he is technically a variant, but he's much more so on the evil side. In fact, he's technically a member of the Crime Syndicate of America, and so fighting alongside Talon and being kind of indoctrinated into the Court of Owls, he's not necessarily a protagonist. But at least it makes for a pretty cool design, because that's the one takeaway I can have from them making a McFarlane Toys figures, that he looks genuinely awesome from a design standpoint for the costume. I really do think that having a Batman-esque kind of interpretation of the owl hero that kind of reminds me a bit of Watchmen, which is technically speaking another DC property with Nite-Owl in there, who's meant to be kind of like the Batman equivalent, but also kind of a Boy Scout Captain America amalgamation within that universe, but that's a whole separate beast. I just feel like there's a bit of shared DNA there that makes me gravitate towards this design and this character from a compelling standpoint, and that's because this design overall just really speaks to me in a really cool way. I think that it lends itself to a very ominous looking interpretation of someone that can actually be a foil to Batman, and because of that, I feel like for the most part they get the design done very effectively in McFarlane toy form. You can see an awful lot of little strengths here and there that you can definitely see McFarlane at their highest, especially with the Kevlar look amongst the thighs, the padded armoring around the knees, the chest piece, the armoring going alongside there, along with the little owl symbol, I guess you could call it, right there in the middle of his chest. And then the head sculpt itself is also doing a very good service for the cowl, the eyes kind of protruding there, kind of giving a very firm stance on the sculpt. And even the mouthpiece, though it kind of resembles a little bit of that Injustice 2 page puncher, it looks like they might have reused that, at least for the Injustice 2 later down the line, because that was released subsequently after. But nevertheless, they did a good job of trying to bring an awful lot of the sculpting that makes this design so cool to me come to fruition. One thing that I was actually not expecting to like as much as I did are the gauntlets here that look a little feathery. And on the subject of feathers, I really dig the design of the cape this time around. I really do like that you have a little bit of this layered thing going alongside here to kind of emulate the look of feathers amongst the cape. And to me, that is awesome. That to me speaks to the character and is a little touch, a little detail that sure leans more so towards the design rather than the actual quality at hand here, but they did an effective job of carrying that over and giving a good sense as to why the design of this costume, to me, looks pretty badass. But alas, much like Icarus, it looks like this owl flew too close to the sun as far as actual quality of the plastic. It does feel like maybe because he's a Target exclusive that someone over at McFarlane Toys didn't really oversee the mass production of this guy all the way across, because even though it doesn't really look all that much like on camera, there's some QC issues here and there as far as the handling of the plastic that just doesn't feel right in hand. But upon closer inspection, you can see a little bit of this coming across, especially when we take a look at the part here where the cape, the chest piece, and the overall neck and shoulder pieces kind of come together here on the figure. You can see a little bit of the adhesive and a little bit of the paint jobs just kind of smudging and smearing across the different planes of plastic being utilized here to put everything together. And it kind of makes the whole job look just a little bit sloppy. Plus, when we do move the cape, the rather cool looking and dynamic cape out of the way that I really like the design choices behind it, you can see that flattening the legs to have a much more neutral stance brings about this look that looks a bit on the bow-leggedy side, and handling the pieces of the legs as well as the limbs themselves just doesn't feel all that great in hand. It feels like it was just kind of strung together. The arms themselves are also a little bit on the robust side, where it just feels like different pieces of prior existing McFarlanes may have been utilized to just kind of Frankenstein this thing all together. It kind of fools you a little bit on the visual side, but once you get to handling him, I just had this like kind of wincing look on my face as I felt him in hand. It was a completely different beast altogether. The same goes sadly for that really cool cape that, even though it looks awesome, doesn't really feel awesome as far as the actual quality they used for the rubber in its place, especially when we get to the much more narrower side of the top part here of the cape. You can see a little bit of that again, that smudging and kind of tearaway look to the plastic itself that just feels like it was just kind of strung together at the last minute. I feel like this is one of those McFarlanes where maybe Todd himself looked at the design, thought it was cool, and at the very last second managed to squeeze this guy into the schedule, and the factory was just not up to par to be able to pump this out during mass production, and because of that, you kind of take a few hits as far as quality is concerned. So as I handled him, I called upon the articulation to see if there was any form of saving grace, and again, that's where a little bit of that slight haphazardness comes into play, because the head is able to rotate 360, and then when it comes to tilting, it feels just a little bit on the stiffer side, though it is much more doable than I was giving it credit for at first. I just wish it would kind of tilt from side to side a little bit more frivolously, but it doesn't. It still is able to work with what it's got. It's once we get to the arms where I'm like, yo, what is going on here? You are able to move the arms all the way upwards like so, and they would be allowed to rotate, but of course, because of the feathery shoulder piece right here that's placed upon the top of the shoulder, it's not going to allow it to fully do that. You technically do have extension, but it's so stiff and robust amongst the ratcheted joints that it's actually a little scary to get the arms to rotate all the way upwards, almost as if some of the joints may have been sculpted in a way that's just a little too tight for the joints that was then placed in the area here. And then when it comes to any kind of shrugging motion, you have a little bit of that going on right there with this piece kind of moving and helping alongst the fluidity of it, but not much else that I can really speak for as far as the shoulders are concerned. It just, like the clicking that I feel, it just doesn't feel fluid. It feels like this could cause some major wear and tear as time goes on by with this figure, especially the longer that I own it. Then we get to the biceps, which are just as stiff. When it comes to rotating them inwards, it's actually the much more favorable way to do it, because when you rotate it outwards, to me it was so stiff that it would just end up moving the top shoulder piece along with it and kind of nulls the bicep altogether. Once we get to the joints and the elbows, it's a bit more on the fluid side. It's able to bend all the way upwards like so, and the joints at the clawed up hands are able to rotate all the way around, as well as being able to pivot inwards and outwards like so. The torso joint also has a mid-cut underneath this part of the chest armor that is able to slightly nudge from left to right, but as you can very audibly hear, again, very, very stiff. It's like there was weird things going on during mass production that caused the sculpting of said joints to be a little disproportionate, and because of that, some articulation is kind of lost in translation. So sadly, the mid-torso cut is one of those victims. You do get slight crunching inwards and outwards, but not much happening there from side to side. You do have a waist joint that is fully able to rotate 360 degrees, so there is some form of salvation right there to be able to have some decent torso posability going on right there. But sadly, again, I really would have taken the mid-torso cut a little bit better than that of the waist, but that's just me personally speaking. Then we get to the top leg joints that are able to move all the way upwards like so, and slightly towards the back. In fact, it's actually much more flexible, and as you can see, it kind of allows a little bit of gappage going alongside between the diaper and the top part of the leg, and as such, it's actually able to extend pretty generously, almost at the full 180, so there is a silver lining with the weird placement of the legs right there. And you do get 2 joints at the knees that are fully able to bend all the way upwards right there. So you are able to get that going, provided that you move the cape out of the way. And one of the saving graces of the articulation is that thankfully we do get the awesome ankle joints right here, that despite the slight bow-leggedness of the shins and calves going on behind the back part of the boot right there, you at least are able to get the ankles to rotate all the way around horizontally without any need for pivoting because of the way that those joints are designed. And as such, you're able to pivot downwards and upwards, cutting the joint in half, but allowing an awful lot of fluidity and posability with the ankles like so. So you can get it in a variety of poses at 2 joints at the top and bottom of that flush ankle joint that looks much more natural to the human body, which I really love. And of course, you do get the toesies right there that are actually a little bit more looser than I would want them to be, but at least they are complementing the figure, at least much more so than the top part of the body we're able to do. So you can obviously tell by now that I have very mixed feelings about this figure, because I have really great affinity for the design and the look of the character. I just wish that we would have gone just as much of a badass of a McFarlane figure to suit the character properly. And I kind of wish that maybe there would have been an accessory to kind of amplify the quality of the figure, but sadly, there's none really to be found here, aside of course from the pieces of the Build-A-Figure wave that are designed to form Starro. Sadly, not much else I can really kind of salvage here in a way to kind of dress up the figure, save for maybe the little star piece here that can maybe go on the chest. You can kind of retrofit and dress the figure in a way that it looks like he's being controlled by Starro via this little minion here. And the piece itself is actually really well painted, sculpted and detailed, especially with the little teeth and sucking cups on the inside of the star piece, as well as the little translucent eye here in the middle. This is actually really well designed and sculpted, and there's an awful lot of quality found here, but it's just not the desired accessory I personally would have wanted to go for. Some form of batarang equivalent, an owl wang. Oh my god. Okay, what am I even thinking? Or a grapple hook, or just something that would fit the arsenal of Owlman here to make him look even more badass would have been warranted, but all those things combined with the articulation and the quality of plastic could be an isolated incident for my figure, but there was just enough done to give me the impression that this was one of the last minute additions to the 2022 slot for McFarlane Toys, and to also give Target an exclusive to get collectors to come into their stores. Nevertheless, it is a decent figure if you're a completist and if you are interested in the Owlman character. Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily blame you for skipping on him entirely. And because of that, I'll give him a 6 out of 10. He's a pretty okay figure, not necessarily the worst that I've ever come across that makes me regret adding him to the collection, but definitely needed more time in the oven, or in this case, kiln, to get the sculpting and the quality of plastic up to par with what we've come to expect from McFarlane Toys, or at least I would have expected. So that brings me to my question to you guys. Now that we're at the end of 2022, what's so far been your greatest disappointment of the year as far as McFarlane Toys, or hell, even Marvel Legends are concerned? What's the one that you look at and go, damn, this would have been it if it wasn't for that one issue with the articulation, the accessories, the quality, QC, whatever? Let me know in the comment section below. Of course, as always, hit the thumbs up button if you liked the video, hit the thumbs down if you didn't. Helps out the algorithm, push these videos forward, and also gives me some insight on what to do next for 2023. And if you want to stay tuned for that content, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. In the meantime, stay humble. I'll catch you next time.